share that. The capabilities, though, in field maps, as I mentioned, because we folded in some years back, about 3 or 4 years ago, the collector, the navigator, the explorer, and some of the other tools that people were saying, I've got these different tools. Why can't you guys just make one tool that does it all? This sort of sounds like the Lord of the Rings, one ring to rule them all. Anyway, the point is, you can do these things. You can view, you can mark up, you can collect, you can inspect, you can track locations of you and your fellow field workers, et cetera, out in the field with just field maps. So you're preparing these maps for the field with this Field Maps app, and then you're actually collecting data in the field with the app as well. The components, you can see that this is where I think life gets a little bit interesting, because these tools traditionally were sort of completely separate, map-based, form-based, button-based, but now inside, and I think it's because we have this kind of rich environment where the data users are talking with each other, which is a good thing. But some people were saying, I like this capability with Survey 123 where I can actually create a form. Why can't we do that in field maps? So now, actually, in field maps, you have a form-based capability, which is pretty cool, because then you get all the power of field maps with a form. They're not completely separate functionality anymore. The Field Maps web app, just like many other tools in this ArcGIS environment, when you're creating a survey, you've got Survey 123, for example. You've got all kinds of surveys there with little thumbnails. When you're creating story maps, you've got your existing story maps in this sort of zone with little thumbnails for those and the ability to go into any one of those and edit. Same thing with your maps for field maps. You've got, hey, I've got a collection of 12 maps. I want to be able to edit any one of those when I go into that zone. So same kind of experience that you've got with these other tools. The smart forms, like I was mentioning earlier, without spending too much time on this, because time doesn't permit us to do so, but you've got conditions, if then, you've got groups to organize fields, and much more. Read-only, required. So doing work actually out in the field, these requirements are actually slightly out of date. So we've got, obviously for newer operating systems now, but the location with high accuracy GPS, we'll talk about that here for sure in the workshop. Again, the field maps gives you the ability. Arcade is the scripting language behind ArcGIS Online. Arc, because that's sort of the traditional starting 3 letters for many of these tools. So Arcade was kind of a spiffy name for the scripting language. But Arcade allows you, as probably many of you know, to label features. This divided by this times 100. I want to label that with a percentage rather than a raw number. Or to filter the data. I want this filtered, this region, this variable, and last month, the new assets from last month. So Arcade is a nice introduction to a more advanced sort of dipping toes into the waters with ArcGIS notebooks, Python notebooks. Arcade is a very intuitive kind of a scripting language, sort of like Python, and it gives you the variable names that you can construct expressions. So very powerful, and lets you do stackable labels and things like that. The tools in there, as you can see, and you can also mark things up with a variety of different ways of doing so. Notes from your field workers, sketching, markers, and then the sharing. Even Apple Watch support, which is kind of cool. I haven't tried that yet, but that's pretty cool. Points, lines, and polygons, the GPS, higher resolution, spatial accuracy capabilities, and much more. Okay. This is a bit old, I realize, but one of the things that I wanted to mention here, let me look at my notes and make sure I'm not going to miss anything significant. Calculated expressions to control visibility, for example, of fields in your form, and to calculate values based on existing fields. That was the main thing I wanted to mention there. Indoor capability, I mentioned that ever so briefly earlier. Okay, enough said. We need to move on. A little bit more about calculated expressions, not just for attributes, but calculating based on geometry. I know we've got a couple of Audubon people in here, so I thought I'd include a bird. I know you folks do a lot more than bird sightings and things, but I want to automatically store the region I'm in. Fetch an attribute from an underlying polygon. I can do that. Or another example, I'm filling out an inspection report. I need to provide my name. I can store a name, a username, initials, some sort of code that indicates my name, or an email address, and some other things. So there's a common calculated expressions in field maps that you can dig into for more detail. Also, contingencies, if-then statements, common name. You can see some examples here on this slide. A little bit more on contingent values. I probably have too many slides on that, but I really love this capability. So, okay. Geofencing, let's chat about that a bit. Say you only want to start location sharing when you enter a zone, when you're going into the wetland or going into the, I don't know, the city center, a certain park, a certain wildlife area, whatever. So you've got that capability. Start when you enter, stop when you exit, or stop when you enter, start when you exit. Maybe it's an exclusion zone. Maybe it's a personal residence and you don't want to track any location there, and so on. So you can set up geofencing. There's some capabilities there as well. And a bit more on that, as you can see here. I know we've got some utility people in this workshop, so I'm going to say that on the Esri Industries page, you can find some of my colleagues that are in the utilities area. As you know, I'm in the education zone, the education sector, so I'm just going to be fully transparent saying I'm not a utilities analyst. I have a lot of respect for what they do, but I'm going to refer you to the Esri Industries utilities page. But I did want to, again, put a fine point on the capability of, you know what, with just my mobile device, that 1 or 2 or 3 meters is not going to be good enough. I've got fiber optic cable. I want to be able to map graveyards. This headstone is different from this headstone, and they're 0.2 meters apart. They're 1 foot apart. I want to be able to distinguish those two. How do I do those kinds of things? So we've got the capability of doing that. And then this is the summary of what you're doing with field maps. You're creating a map for field data collection. You're sharing that map in field maps in the field maps tool. You or your users, your community is collecting the data, and then you and or people that you designate as well can inspect, verify, sync the data. Field maps is the only one of the 3 that lets you do this kind of thing. I've got people checking in and checking out the data. So I want to be able to take the latest and greatest, and I don't want any conflicts to be happening. One analogy is, this is an imperfect analogy, I realize, but like if you're editing an article, you folks are writing an article, and you're in Google Docs, it's sort of, it understands that multiple people are editing at the same time, and you're not overwriting your colleagues, by and large, edits. As opposed to story maps, there's no simultaneous editing in story maps. You can share, and you can toss it back and forth with a colleague. If you're working on a story map and your colleague has access to that story map in a shared update group, for example, in ArcGIS Online, you can both edit, but not at the same time. So you've got other tools with a rough analogy of this kind of thing. With field maps, you can actually have checking in and checking out data and making sure that people aren't overwriting each other's work and that you've got the latest and most accurate information. So that is really the tool for obviously wastewater utilities and other folks like that out in the field, and for many other uses. Now let's change gears a little bit here to Survey 123 and compare that to field maps. As I mentioned earlier, this is a form-based, form-centric field data collection. Remember the Ebola example? Out in the field, health workers. Hey, what's going on here? Are there incidences? Where's the clinics? Where are the field workers, etc. Very form-based. Smart forms. In other words, if it's an integer and you try to put in a floating point, it's not going to work. Or if it's multiple choice and if you set it up single and you want to click on two things, it's not going to work. So smart forms. And then you're immediately able to analyze the results. And now why do I have this App Store and the Google Play buttons? Because there is an app that you can install on a device with Survey 123, or you can also opt to just share it just in a web browser. And it even works if you're offline, as we'll talk about in a bit. The workflow for Survey 123, you're asking questions. That's the one in Survey 123, designing and publishing your form. You're getting answers as you and or your field people collect data. And then you're, like I talked about earlier, making decisions, smarter decisions than if you did not have the data. There are components for Survey 123. There is a website. It's that zone where you get all those little thumbnails, like I have a screenshot here, where you're authoring surveys, you're completing them, you're managing the access. There's some, you can analyze results right inside that website. Survey123.arcgis.com is the website, but you can, once you log into arcgis.com, you know how there's that app launcher, the 3x3 dots, where you can launch story maps, Survey 123, and some other things in there. ArcGIS Insights, it's that app launcher. This is where you can also get to Survey 123. The connect method, which is the Excel method, is more advanced surveys. And the completed one looks like something like this. Hey, what bird do you see near you? The managing the survey zone, again, like I was showing in the previous slide, gives you the surveys that you have authored. Okay. And also you've got some basic reporting tools. It's not more than about 10 screens. This is one of those capabilities where it's sort of analogous to story maps. And we on the education team and others here at Esri are, working closely with the development team. We don't want it to be overly engineered, if you know what I mean. We want it to be actually pretty simple. We want new capabilities, and so we're trying to juggle, people's expectations and your input, for example, about, we need this tool, we need that tool. But Survey 123, we want to keep it actually pretty simple to be able to create, especially in the web form. So we're not over-engineering it, and we're not over-engineering the reporting tools. You get a map, as you can see there. You can get some bar charts and some, who's filled it out when, and you can get a word cloud and, a ring chart, and that's basically it. So it's not super detailed, but it's on purpose. And even in Survey 123, you can download the data, the results, to use it in Excel and R, in ArcGIS Pro, etc. You can use Survey 123 with a higher precision, TopCon, Trimble, Bad Elf, etc., GPS. You can community science or citizen science or crowdsource your surveys. You can use the app in the field, or you can not use it. The app looks a little bit nicer than the web browser display, and the app allows for offline data collection, but you can also collect in the web browser offline. You can add the data to your web map as well. So as I mentioned earlier, and as you folks saw, you've got this survey and dashboard that I created yesterday when I was surveying you all. Okay, so you saw this. Hey, SCGIS 2023 survey. What's a little bit about your role? So I've got, 5 simple questions in here. How much have you used ArcGIS field tools? How many times have you attended an SCGIS conference? Where are you located? Notice I had it set to the world because I knew you folks were international. If you were doing this on your own survey of a wetland or something, obviously your map, you'd want it to be pretty detailed, right? You'd want it to either be a satellite image or an OpenStreetMap or some other base map where your users are seeing what's on the ground in a local area. And then what question do you have for me? Okay, so I'll take a look at those. So the result is I've then poured the results into a web map, right? So I've got this web map inside ArcGIS Online. Let me show the table. And as you can see, I've got 16 things in there right now with all of the data that you folks figured out or filled out. Okay. Very nice. And then I've got the results displayed on a map. Great. Oh, we've got someone from South Africa. Very cool. I love geography. Yep, sweet. So you've got the questions in there, and you've got folks from all over. Very nice. Okay, so the point is I've got the survey 123 poured into a web map, and then the last piece that I have is a dashboard. I'm going to refresh this just in case someone else has filled out the survey since the time I refreshed this, and a couple more people have, so I'm glad I did that. So again, you've got the map here inside the dashboard. This is an ArcGIS dashboard. I've got a simple bar chart here with how much have you used ArcGIS field tools. Most of you have responded with a bit. So it gives me a sense of the survey right away. Of course, think outside the box. This could be trees, this could be animals, this could be weather, this could be water quality, etc. 16 people, that's an indicator, have filled out the survey thus far, and I've got a simple pie chart here. So a legend, a map, a bar chart, an indicator, and a pie chart. 5 elements on my dashboard. Simple to configure. Okay, well, we're going to guide you through how to do that here in a bit. Okay, so that's the survey and the dashboard of our wonderful participants in our workshop. And it all came from the survey 123. How does citizen science enable your surveys? Okay, let's take a look at the design form for one of my surveys. Okay, so I'm going to go into one of my surveys right now. And I've got a lot of tabs here. So for sanity's sake, I'm going to get rid of some of these. So inside here, let's take a look at what you have once you create a survey 123. You're going to have a set of content inside ArcGIS Online. I've put all the content for the SCGIS conference survey into a folder. GIS is complicated enough. Don't make it more complicated by making life more difficult on yourself. What I mean by that is name your files and your layers and your maps appropriately. Don't just say, Friday, 6 p.m. test, right? Name them appropriately, put them in folders, and populate the metadata. You don't need to write your master's thesis in there, but pay attention to those little bits of metadata that we ask you to fill out, because it'll make it easier for other people to find your content later if you share it, and it'll also make it easier for you to find your own content. So that's my little lecture on best practices. So inside my folder for the SCGIS conference survey, I've got a couple of elements here that I was testing, but most appropriately, most pertinent to what we're talking about right now, I've got a conference survey form. Notice I've shared this actually with everyone because I wanted you all to be able to see it. So the survey it's looking like this. Okay, open in survey 123. I'm going to open it in the survey 123 app. Okay, so, I don't have the app on my device here, but if I did, I would be able to open it in the app. Well, what if I wanted to do this? I want to open it or manage it on the Survey 123 website. So this is actually on a laptop. Okay, so it's on a device, and you can see that I've got a little bit of data from the survey, and I've got a map, right? I've got some elements. I've got the table of data and all the things that you folks filled out. The most important things to take note of right here are, first of all, this settings. Use the version that the survey was published with. So Survey 123, just like other tools, evolves, right? Gets easier to use, and it also gets more powerful over time. And so I'm usually saying I'm using the version that the survey was published with. I don't have to use the latest version. In my case, they're all education related. So that's important. The other thing that I wanted to mention here is under the sharing, the collaborate button here, sharing the survey. Here's my long, gnarly, URL. Notice that every single thing in ArcGIS Online, as you probably have noticed from your use in the past, has a very long map ID on it, an alphanumeric map ID. So they all have their own unique map ID. There's also, though, a QR code, and there's also a short link for this. Open the survey in the new tab to test it, so I can test it here and make sure it works. But back in the design zone, the other thing to mention here is who can submit to the survey. Do you want it to just be groups inside your ArcGIS Online organization? Maybe it's your tree mapping group, maybe it's your water quality group, etc. So you can make a group and just share this with that group. In my case, I want to share it with everyone. Okay, what can submitters do? When editing results, do you want them to only add new data? Just to give you an example, a real example from my own work, I was responsible for setting up some of the initial ESRI MOOCs, massive open online courses. With 10,000 people taking a course, one of the things that I had in there was kind of like what I had with you all. Tell me where you work, a little bit about what you want to get out of the course, and where you're located. Not your actual individual workplace, but some city because of location privacy issues. I just wanted them to indicate their city. But I thought, with 10,000 people, I only want them to add new records, because with 10,000 people, there's probably going to be someone that says, someone who's a little bit, maybe a bit of a practical joker, I can move everybody's location to Iceland. So because there was that possibility, if I said add and update records, I just said add new records. So that is one thing to keep in mind. And what else do I have in here? This design is what you were seeing earlier. You've got the form over there, but look, you've got this capability, and I'm going to turn you loose here in a little bit to be able to do some of these things on your own. But this plus sign over here on the right side, that will let you add, oh, I want a date. Okay, I've got a question right now. Date of data collection. Submitting date is the default value. Okay, so 15 August is today's date, and I could save that, right? And I could also move this up and down. So again, just like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms, I can modify this really rather quickly with other capabilities here as well. So I'm going to cancel that, but with this plus sign, you've got all of these things on the right-hand side. Appearance, you can add your own logo, as you probably would expect, change colors, etc. Options, as you saw, I had you are spatial. Your data was sent successfully. What I often do in this screen is say, click here to see your results on a map or on a dashboard, just so that people can say, hey, I've got my data added. That's great. Little confirmation note. Then I also, for most projects, signs, buildings, historical buildings, community gardens, etc., things that I'm collecting out in the field, I say click here to add an additional point. And a couple of folks are saying that they never got the survey. So if you didn't get the survey from yesterday from my email, that means I don't have your email as one of the attendees. So just drop me a note and I'll send it out. Because I do want to send a follow-up note to all of you. So make sure that if you did not receive my email, like maybe 4 p.m. Mountain Time yesterday, that I have you in the spreadsheet. Don't worry, I'm not going to pester you with more than one email, but I would like to send a follow-up for some of these links, okay? So this is the design form. Great. Let's skip back to our presentation mode here. I've talked about the link for sharing it with others. I've talked a little bit about who can submit data to your survey, and do you want them to be able to open it up in a browser, or do you want them to be able to have a choice, the browser and or the field app? Two ways to create one of these things. As I mentioned earlier, you can use the web designer that you just saw with me demoing that ever so briefly. And then you can also use this connect. Since we're not going to have time in the workshop to go through the connect method, you basically get bounced into Excel, okay? And it looks like this. This is for my example I gave earlier, living, non-living. If it's living, you get these choices. If it's non-living, you get these choices. And so inside Excel, we give you the schema in Excel. You're not bounced into a blank Excel spreadsheet. We give you the schema with the labels and the fields and the structure that then you can modify for additional power. And there's loads of tutorials on how to do that in Excel. So in this slide, I've got, hey, open a web browser and go to this survey for a campus vegetation mapping. So if you want to do that, I'm basically on slide 57 right now. I'm going to open that link in a new tab, and that's going to open a vegetation mapping survey. If you would like to fill that out, great. I'll give you a moment to do that. It is, again, this bit.ly link here. Okay, and that's going to take you to a vegetation mapping survey. If you have a photo of a tree and you know where it is, feel free to fill that out